Hi, welcome back to another ET Talk. This is ET Talk number 4, I believe, and I'm Cole Camplese, Chief Information Officer and Vice President for Technology at the University of Texas at Austin. Today we're continuing our conversation around AI at the university, and we have something really interesting today. Within our AI studio, we aspire to hire a whole bunch of students over the next year, and a couple of the early students that we've had have done amazing work for us. And with that, I'm joined here again by our good friend Mario.
Thanks for having me.
And a freshman at the university, Nikhil.
Thank you for having me as well.
Oh God, it's so great to have you here. And we wanted to we'll get into some technical details. We'll talk about AI in general. We'll talk about student appreciation for it. But I wanted to start by just sharing this quick story about you, if you're okay with that.
Of course.
We haven't really met for real in any real way, other than the fact that last summer, right, the end of last summer, you sent me an email out of the blue as an incoming student. And you said, hey, I hear you're doing stuff with AI. I've built some things. You sent me a link to a project that you were working on and asked, hey, are there any opportunities or anything like that? First of all, thank you for doing that. That's really incredible. And I want to tell you that, like, I wish more students would think that way, that we see a lot of students complain about the things we do and give us, very constructive feedback. But what we really love to see is people say, hey, we can actually help you do some things. And so you reaching out and taking that initiative is fantastic. And hopefully it's making your first year here at UT a little bit more interesting for yourself.
Of course. It's always been like, I've always tried to learn new things and always wanted to, like, at the end of the day, the reason I learned software or learned how to program was to basically like help people do whatever they're trying to do. And if I'm helping people that in turn help others, that's like the ultimate form of that.
That's incredible. I mean, that's what we do, right? That's what Mario and I sort of feel that way. Like, we wake up with this really deep drive for supporting this community. And I think, to hear you say that is very gratifying. So really appreciate it. So you're a freshman. What's your major?
I'm actually an aerospace engineering major at the university, but I've had a decent amount of software experience on the side along with the engineering aspect of it. I wanted my career to be more on the aerospace side, which is why I'm doing that major. But I still wanted to like keep in touch with my software aspect as well. Yeah,
because I think everything, regardless of what you're doing career-wise, if you have those skills, it opens up a whole other set of opportunities for you.
Yeah.
Have you been surprised? I mean, as a young person, when did ChatGPT really hit for you? About what grade?
It was like sophomore year of high school was when it happened.
And did you instantly gravitate toward it?
No, it actually went under my radar for like the first month of launch. And then I started hearing about like some friends using it. And so like after I did a bit of research, I was like, wait, this is like completely new stuff, right? Like it's kind of crazy to still be able to like talk to a computer. Like if you just think about it, it's still kind of insane.
It really is. And for Mario and I, it's even more of a mind stretch. Like we remember when our personal computers weren't connected to the internet. And they had simulated, a lot of the games were simulated in that way. You remember
of course.
A lot of those where you could like choose your own adventure, Infocom games where you were actually typing commands and it was coming back at you. But, it didn't take long for us to realize that was all just basic decision tree programming kind of stuff. But to see where this is today, I mean, it has to be really a disruptive force in high school.
I mean, a lot of people were using it in ways that I guess seemed questionable, while others were really like pushing the boundary of what you could like use the tool for, like showing the good aspects of it. I think it's true that like at least everyone has like utilized AI in some format, like maybe even starting from 6th, 7th grade when they're like exposed to the like full effects of the internet and I guess ingrained into like what options they are that are available for them. I think it's very important that we have to understand what makes it tick for students and making sure that at the end of the day, they're still learning the things that they're supposed to be
Yeah.
learning, right? Instead of like trying to circumvent the process. And I think that like UT and even my high school and high schools like all around the country and the world have really started to put a focus on it,
Yeah.
to integrate it into the curriculum instead of it being more of a like side project or like a side thing that just happens.
Did you see that happening while you were in high school, that like some of your teachers were saying, okay, either A, don't use AI at all,
Mm-hmm.
or I'm going to try to find a way to integrate it into my class? Was it sort of those two ends of the spectrum?
Yeah, like it was actually quite polarizing to see. People were either really for it and tried to integrate multiple different options for students to use AI-enabled tools, while others were just like, you shouldn't have access to this yet type idea. Because like at the end of the day, like both arguments make sense. On one side, if AI is a tool that is so powerful, then it's going to be like part of everyone's lives for the foreseeable future. So it makes sense to have experience with it. But on the other side, it makes sense to for students to like try to understand concepts and not just have a reliance on it.
Right.
It should be more of something that they have available to them if they decide that they do need it. If it's not available, then they should still be able to do something.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, and Mario, this may resonate with you because we've talked about it on the show. The idea that when we were really entering higher education, not as students, but as staff, the internet was sort of the new thing. And we watched educators go to graduate school into classes to learn how to use the internet for their teaching. Do you see more of your faculty integrating AI? Do you think that there's an awareness of how to use it, like as you use the word, use it for good? Are you seeing more and more faculty integrated, or are you still seeing the sort of, I'm not quite sure about this yet?
So like, if you look at the faculty on more of the STEM side of my class and coursework, they seem to be a lot more on like the neutral end, where they're trying to, I guess, strike a balance between incorporating it into the coursework and also making sure that it's not so, it's not like throughout everything that they do.
Right.
While like more so on the like the arts aspect of it, I've just seen a perspective of AI forcing students to not be able to express themselves truly, especially when like a lot of students try to just circumvent the arts and just try to figure out a way to like bypass all of the
So it
work.
stifles creativity a little bit. I've heard that as well.
Yeah.
Nikhil.
And like even from the faculty's perspective, I can like understand that they don't want to have everyone just submit AI infused work.
Sure.
Even if the students took at least some effort to create it, I think it's more so like the reason that they themselves chose the arts was to be able to have everyone have their own voice and teach people to have their own voice.
So being intentional about how you incorporate it into the course.
Yeah.
That's good advice, Nikhil.
Are you sure you're just a freshman?
I'm positive. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'm going to check with the registrar to make sure. So tell me then, like, you sent me a project that you built. Describe that thing that you made that you shared with us.
Yeah. So I made a kind of tool that incorporated different model providers. So basically you can have one interface for OpenAI models, Anthropic models, Gemini models, and kind of be able to pick who you want to send requests to and basically have it so that you can kind of like create a team of different models that, you know, where like some models are really good at, like, let's say, writing a first draft of emails, for example, or another model is really good at writing code. Being able to like pick and choose for which task you want which models, even in the same chat context. And this project kind of like unifies everything together.
Yeah, and it's really not that much unlike what we're doing with Spark in that you can choose different models to interact. What I love about what you've described is more of like a handoff, a workflow where an agent or a model can have a conversation with another model and complete another part of the task. Do you think that going forward we're going to see more of that kind of interplay between different specific LLMs and specific agents in the same interface?
Yes, because at the end of the day, being able to like pick and choose which model does what and having the models play to their strengths means that products that decide to do that will just end up having a better user experience.
Yeah.
And one thing about AI, the AI landscape, is that there's no real sense of user loyalty. They'll decide to go with the one that achieves their task
It's
the
interesting.
best.
That's super interesting.
Yeah, it's not like a Mac versus Windows
No.
thing. It's not a holy war.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, I find that in the way that I use it. Like
Mhm.
I switch. It's amazing how much I use ChatGPT to help me write instructions for projects in Claude.
Yeah.
Right? Because ChatGPT seems better
Mhm.
at organizing all of that thought than Claude does.
Yes.
And it's so interesting that ChatGPT knows what makes Claude work well.
Mhm.
And so I do that too. I mode switch between various applications.
I have a question for you, Nikhil. So, do you find that your peers, other students, understand that there are different LLMs and some have better output for certain tasks than others? Or is that mainly just your technical? Like, I'm curious.
So I would say people like it's not like common knowledge yet.
Mhm.
Being able to like understand which models are good at what, because you also need to like have the ability to access all of these different LLMs
True.
to judge what makes each one
Yeah.
tick, right?
Yeah.
But I will say, like, for example, people that are really into software development tend to like have a better idea of which models do what.
Yeah.
I think that's just because they like just have more exposure to them
Yeah.
in general.
Yeah.
Especially because I think GitHub like gives GitHub Copilot free for all students. So like people that are like integrated into that like software specific ecosystem tend to have a lot better
Yeah.
judgment.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's going to take time,
Mhm.
right? That whole figuring out as an individual what tools work best for you. But it's sort of the way that the world has always worked, and I think we as human beings are well equipped with that kind of discernment ability to over time. And something we talked about in the last episode with Cody and Mario was the idea that the more you put into an environment,
Mhm.
the more appropriate the output is,
Yeah.
or the more directed.
Mhm.
And it's going to be fascinating to see how this model variants. So like it's not Coke or Pepsi,
Yeah.
right? It's ChatGPT and Claude and Copilot and Gemini, and to see how all that shakes out.
Yeah.
But how long that literacy takes
Mhm.
for it to reach students is something that I think we're trying to keep our eye on right now.
Yeah.
As we were leaving the studio, one of the student workers out at the front desk out there had his laptop open and he was using ChatGPT.
Mhm.
And I didn't see that, but Cody saw it as he was walking by and he said, "Oh, ChatGPT." And the guy said, "Yeah." And he said, "Is that the free version?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Hey, what about Spark?" He's like, "I have no idea what that is." So talk about that for a moment as a student. Like, should we be promoting Spark more? Should we be not promoting these tools? How do you see this playing out? Like what's the reception on campus? Because I think students are a little divided about the presence of AI
Mhm.
in higher education as well.
So I definitely think that students should be given the option to be able to use these tools. And I will also say that having access to high quality artificial intelligence is a net positive. If we also, I guess, educate students on how to best use it,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's definitely a challenge to implement it well. But if we do, in fact, figure out a good balance between allowing AI to be incorporated into more incorporated into the curriculums, I think that is going to be better than just flat out saying that we're just not going to have AI at all.
Oh yeah, I mean, you're too young for this, but we lived through the war over whether students were allowed to look at Wikipedia. Right?
Uh-huh.
I mean, that was real.
Yeah.
They wanted us to go pull the old encyclopedias off the shelf because somehow they trusted Britannica more than the world's experts because it was a crowdsourced knowledge
Platform.
base. And, it's funny for us older guys, we've seen this adoption and diffusion cycle happen over and over again. I mean, like the chalkboard was introduced to education in 1855, and it was probably one of the most disruptive pieces of academic technology ever brought into a room.
Yeah.
Like teachers had to turn their back to their classroom for the first time. They had to learn how to write with letters that everybody could see. Like that penmanship that your elementary school teacher used was not because she learned from the same teacher. It was because that's a teaching practice that emerged from that technology. And I worry that there isn't enough time between these major leaps that we're seeing to help our faculty and our instructors develop a teaching practice like the looping letters, right? That takes decades to establish. What advice would you give Mario and I on how to reach the teachers and the faculty to encourage them to step into this world maybe bravely or courageously and maybe co-create with students or other ideas?
I think what would be interesting is having faculty that are like interested in like maybe exploring AI to, I guess, like hold a test seminars or sessions like that, where there's no pressure of academics or grades or any like.
So take them out of the performative pressure aspect.
Yes.
Yep.
And then I'm sure there's going to be students interested in whatever fields the faculty want to teach at. And like, I think being able to have a test run where you have like a couple sessions a semester will really like show teachers how, if they did use AI in an actual class, how that would actually impact the students' outcomes throughout. Like you can even have tests that measure the students' knowledge, but like because of the fact that it's not going to affect anything beyond just the session.
Right. You can throw basically a whole bunch of stuff at the wall and see what works and then down select from that and take it back to the classroom. Yeah. So in your mind, like getting them to participate it's a contact sport, right? They're not in the audience. They have to be the ones out there performing to feel that. I like that.
Role shift a little bit.
Yeah, it really is. And, you know, I worry as an administrator that I don't have the time. Like that's the excuse we all hear, especially when I don't have the time to do that. Like I'm a physicist. I think about that. I don't have time to learn how to teach my students how to learn with AI. But it's sort of like it's going to become a core literacy, don't you think?
Absolutely. I think it's going to be as important for you to be able to interact effectively with AI, like as compared to like being able to write an email effectively to a colleague. Especially because of the rate, I think these tools are evolving. Like every single month, there's some new capability that they're able to do that it was just like unfathomable to think about before.
Well, and that's the thing. It's unfathomable.
Yeah.
It's not just like an advancement we've seen programmatically or with different frameworks for development. It is literally each iteration is fundamentally more powerful than the last, and in ways that I think a lot of people have a hard time comprehending.
Yeah.
You know,
I think like one of the ways that we can help, like, I think that's also a factor as to why faculty have a hard time incorporating AI, because whenever they decide to and like fuse a particular tool into the curriculum, things just change so rapidly that they now have to learn a new tool or a new way to interact with the models to get even better output out of them.
And a new way to interact with their students through the use of AI, right? So that's the other interesting concept. You talked about like how I can sit down and have a conversation with a computer and it talks back. You know, I believe very deeply that learning is a social endeavor. Yeah. That even when you read a book, you're having a conversation with an author. And in that way, you're actually adding a third member to this very intimate learning experience you have with your relationship with your mentor or your teacher. And it changes the entire power dynamic in that as well. Yeah. Like all of a sudden, as the instructor, I may not be the smartest person in that conversation. So it's a whole mind shift as well. Yeah. Do you think students are beginning to experience that as well, where they're having to rethink their role in the learning process?
Well, yes, because I think like there's of course the effect where if a student really doesn't understand a concept, and they go ask an LLM to explain it to them, it becomes like they're only asking the LLM if they weren't able to understand from the professor directly, or they just wanted a second point of view. But if they are still unable to understand the concept, it's kind of like very disheartening to have like different people, like even a computer or a human, both try to explain a concept to them
and still not be able to get
understand.
Yeah.
So I think it's very important to like position the tool in such a way that it's like a support for both the instructor as well as the student, kind of like basically like a middleman between them to help the teacher like more effectively teach and the student more effectively learn.
Like a super intelligent teaching assistant.
Yeah.
It's
A
pretty
sage of sorts.
Yeah, a sage of sorts. Speaking of that, have you heard of UT Sage?
Yeah, I have.
So have you interacted with it in your classes?
None of my classes have used the tool specifically,
Yeah.
but I have like seen the materials and the training videos on them.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely a very interesting idea where you like upload the course materials.
Yep.
And you can have I think it's Claude that is the back end of it.
Yeah.
And Claude will have a lot more context aware. It'll be a lot more context aware of your particular class and then give like relevant answers.
Yeah, and I think the thing that we're proud of is the fact that the learning sciences are being used to inform the way that the model responds.
Yeah.
And faculty can tune that,
Yeah.
right? They can say, don't reveal content more than a week out, like really interesting kinds of things. But again, really shifts the power dynamic in the class.
Yeah.
From sage on the stage to, this
the
other
faculty
thing.
a faculty member has to accept that there's another expert that can be involved in that conversation, like you were talking about, and the learning experience, right?
Yeah.
I'd be curious, Nikhil, do you mind?
Yeah. Knock yourself out.
I would be curious if we were to think about Sage not being faculty driven, but students having some ownership of the tutors that are being developed. I'm like, take me through, would that be something useful for you, or?
It definitely would, right? Because you're going to be able to have like something that you can depend on. And you can just like the ability to like upload coursework and having the model like reference everything per generation is pretty powerful. Like, I don't know if you've heard of RAG, retrieval augmented generation.
Yeah.
It's a technical concept where basically when you upload documents, you run like the model effectively creates a mind map of sorts to understand what parts of the document are relevant for each question. The nice thing you can do when you just upload the documents directly to the model on each request is you just end up having the model just ends up having a significantly easier time
I see what you're saying.
seeing the documents and like creating a response that I guess like kind of weaves between the different documents that are
Well, it takes the knowledge base from this to this, right?
Like hyper focuses the model.
Sure.
So I'd be curious if we asked that same question, but without Sage in the middle. Would you do you do that today? Do you use any of your LLMs to build like those kinds of tutors for your courses?
Yeah, like I like interchange between GPT, Claude, and Gemini. I have different agents for each of them.
Yeah.
And I tend to like prefer for like mathematical courses to give agents to OpenAI, and then for like more writing or arts related classes, tend to give it to Claude, and then for like general research, I use Gemini for that.
Interesting.
Super interesting.
Yeah. And so why this is an important question to us is we're beginning to think about what Spark 2.0 looks like, and do we think it's important for us to leverage one of the 2 or 3 big leaders in the space? Do we keep it more agnostic and give people more choice? So that's really what's on our mind. So to hear you talk about the way that you can discern between the models for specific things reinforces the idea that it, in a meta way, it is a new literacy, not just interacting with it, but interacting with the specific model in the specific way. And I don't know if we should be expecting our audiences to have that cognitive capability today, or is it our responsibility to help scaffold that and build that over time?
I think that we do need to provide some guidance, as Nikhil is talking about.
Yeah.
But students also need to learn, start to be exposed, like you said earlier, to these and start making some of those determinations on their own. Part of the learning literacy process is getting your hands dirty, right? And interacting with these. So I don't want to take Nikhil's spotlight, but in my opinion, having Spark with access to multiple models is an advantage.
Yeah, I think it's an advantage. I do. I don't know that the capabilities of the platform itself match the models within their own environments, though. And that becomes sort of the challenge, right? Like when you really think about it. Okay, so I'm putting you on the spot. You've just been promoted to CIO at the University of Texas.
Okay.
What would you do if the president came to you and said, okay, Nikhil, we have a bucket of money, just enough for one product to be enterprise-wide? What do you choose? And you're locked into a 2-year contract.
So like, would this be like picking between Gemini, OpenAI,
Claude?
Okay. In my opinion, I'd kind of want
Come on,
to,
man,
like,
the Board of Regents is waiting for your answer. I mean, we gotta spend this money.
I actually would like to develop like our own in-house solution more than using either one of those like particular model providers, because I think it's important to give people choice between them. And like, considering how rapidly models are advancing, I think it would be very unfortunate to like lock ourselves into one specific provider if in the future a like completely new like market entrant happens to like figure out some new technology.
Just quantum leaps it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I definitely think it's way more advantageous to have like a unified interface for people and then just keep rolling the selection of models that power it.
Interesting. Is the trade-off between diversity of choice versus commercial level experience, where do you put those from a feature perspective? Because we have Claude models, Anthropic models running inside of Spark, but it can't produce the artifacts, right? We can't do those kinds of functions that you can't do right within the product itself. How do you feel about those trade-offs?
So I think like there's definitely a benefit of using a commercial solution, because they basically have to innovate for all of their customers.
Yeah, innovate or die.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that ends up being beneficial for us as a customer for them. I do think like it's important if we end up making our own solution, I think it's very important to have like it be extensible. And maybe even being able to like interface with like some open source community type thing, because the general open source community tends to like be comparable in capability to like enterprise solutions. This is like, it just ends up being because there's going to be some person out there that's like, I can totally make this specific new feature that some multinational corporation happens to do. There's open source solutions like OpenCode, or I think OpenAI's Codex is also open source. So it ends up being like they're all pretty comparable experiences. And I personally like using more of the open source tooling because you can modify it directly. But I also see the appeal for people that just like know that they like this particular thing and are gonna accept being locked into that.
Yeah, I think ChatGPT has turned into like Kleenex or Xerox, where it's become the generic term.
Yeah,
like the marketing term is the term people think of with AI tools right now. Almost everybody I talk to talks about everything as ChatGPT. They're not at the point where they can discern between the product names, let alone the capabilities. But that's fascinating. And let me just say this. Thank you for doing a couple of things. Being brave and reaching out to us before you even stepped on the 40 acres. I can't applaud you enough. And I think it's going to bring you great success in your career. And 2, for taking the time and being vulnerable and sitting down with a couple of old guys to talk about AI. Really appreciate it, man.
It's been my pleasure.
Well, good. Mario, any parting shots?
No, Nikhil, we value your contributions to the AI studio. Cody raves about you all the time.
Yeah.
And I just love hearing that you're a freshman, because we've got you for at least 3
we got
more
you.
years,
We're
3.5 more years. So
he wanted to talk to you about his pay rate. You mentioned that on the way in. But we'll do that off camera. We don't want to make anybody jealous. Well, listen, for ET Talk, this has been a great pleasure. Nikhil, thank you so much. Mario, as always, it's great to have you here in the studio. Thank you to our friends here at the Texas Union Underground Studio. We wish we could get them on camera. We're going to get them out here.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to get them out
Oh,
here.
yeah.
We're going to get them out here. We're going to make them stars.
Yes.
But for now, we say goodbye. Everybody have a great rest of your day. Take it easy.